Time for some Type 40. Extra Type 40, video exclusive Type 40 extra here with me, Dan Hadley, Birmingham's king of the geeks. Welcome back to the channel. Type 40 extra is our before show, it's an after show, and it's an in-between show too, to all the podcasts and live streams and everything else that we put out under the Type 40 name here on the channel. These are casual chats, or sometimes deeper dives. Sometimes we rant, sometimes we rave, we vent our spleen, or we simply geek out, depending on the company and the occasion, So I know what you're thinking. Who's calling this time? Who's calling? Well, I'm happy to say, on the line this time, I've got to get stuck into all of this with me. I'm here with the retro doc himself, Gary Akers, going to get between some pages this time of an upcoming book, aren't we? And geek out a little. You're down for that, aren't you? You're down
Absolutely. For that. Coming to you from across the pond, and I'm always ready to geek out, especially about comics.
Well, this is the thing. That's the entry point, really, because I've known you for 2 or 3 years now through these various live streams and the community. How had it passed me by that you were such a big comics nut?
I've loved comics since I was, a tot. Right now I'm more of a DC fan than a Marvel fan, but I adore Doctor Who comics, and even being a bit of an Anglophile, I followed a lot of other British comics, whether in Countdown or TV Action or all of it, all the Jerry Anderson comics and stuff. So It's not just US comics I love. It's like there's amazing stuff from your neck of the woods too.
A lot of great material, a lot of great talent as well. The likes of Dave Gibbons, Steve Dillon, Alan Moore, John Ridgway, Grant Morrison. They all got, if not their start in Doctor Who comics, not far off. So sometimes it was their second or third job, wasn't it? Something related to Doctor Who.
And I know that Dave Gibbons, who did, of course, Iron Legion, starting off Doctor Who Weekly, and he did it up until the second story in the Peter Davison era. And this was even before he came to the US and jumped into a long run on Green Lantern, and then obviously more famously Watchmen. This
Green Lantern led to Watchmen, didn't he? He made a big impact on that book. Around the time he was working on Doctor Who, I think he was on 2000 AD. He'd done some Dan Dare stuff there. Yeah. So I wouldn't say he was an overnight success, but it wasn't far off. It was certainly. He certainly made a big impact in a relatively short period of time, I think. And as we know, those Dave Gibbons stories, those comic strips from the weekly, they are a direct inspiration, aren't they, on the Doctor Who that we're going to get this very year as part of the 60th anniversary. So this seems fitting, doesn't it, that the comics history is going to be in there too, because there are some Doctor Who fans who get a bit snobbish about Doctor Who comics and don't have any time for them, think they're a waste of space in the monthly and all this kind of thing. And they're entitled to their opinion, but they're simply wrong, aren't they, Gary?
Well, that's absolute nonsense, because I've watched Doctor Who in every form. And if I were to make a list of like the top 10, 15, whatever, Doctor Who stories in any medium, there would be more than one comic story in that. There have been epic Doctor Who comic sagas, especially during the 8th Doctor era, and there have been like single, small, intimate Doctor Who stories that in the magazine that are just as memorable. So no, the comics has been an amazingly rich field of great Doctor Who, and I know RTD was has always been a big fan of the comic, from the earliest days of the weekly. So it's no surprise that he is adapting, one of the earliest stories.
Yes, he's been a big supporter and advocate. I think Doctor Who works beautifully in that medium. But then again, I'm a massive comic book fan as well. I grew up reading some British comics. Look-In, I understand you like Look-In strips as well. And again, over in the States, you didn't get Look-In, but
no, we didn't. I mean, look, if that had been around and I'd been the right age group for that magazine, I would have devoured that every week. It was later on that I found, like on Facebook, there was a Look-In appreciation group, and through that, a link to a site which posts like the complete run of the stories, like everything from $6 Million Man and Bionic Woman to Sapphire and Steel to Tomorrow People, and they're coming out with now gorgeous collected volumes of some of those, which
it is extraordinary. Yeah, it's great stuff. Because I started very much with Look-In. My granddad used to pick that up for me every single week. He'd just buy it when he pick up the TV guide. He used to buy the TV guides for us as well. They used to be about 10, 12p then. And Look-In, I think, was even cheaper, like 7p, something like that. So he'd pick up Look-In for me. And that was a thing from the late 70s onwards. But from about 1979, 1980, when he became aware that I was starting to watch The Incredible Hulk with Bill Bixby and Linda Carter as Wonder Woman, he started to pick up American comic books for me as well. Okay. And so that's how the transition happened for me. That's how I found mostly DC. There's a few Marvel books in the mix there as well.
Got my DC.
And it continued. Whoa, what's that you're wearing, mate?
That's actually this is from a local convention a couple of years ago from WonderCon. And this at the time was all of the characters from the Arrowverse on TV.
Yeah, that's the start. Is that Darwin Cook artwork? It's not far off.
It looks like it, but I don't. Yeah. I think it's in the style.
Just imagine Darwin Cook drawing Doctor Who.
Oh
my God, that would have been absolute bliss.
He's got to be one of my all-time favorite artists. New Frontier, and just everything he did, you could just sit and stare at it.
Every single panel. Yeah, it wasn't just the characters, it was the way that he illustrated light as well and captured mood, conveyed a story, sequential. This is what they call sequential art, isn't it, in comic book form? And he was a master at it. As I say, plenty of those masters have worked in the realms of Doctor Who. So it's when you love comic books and you love Doctor Who, it's only natural, isn't it, when the two things do come together, that we're all over it. And this is a story from this very week, which crosses over into all of that. But before we get stuck into this is the part where I have to remind you, if you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, check you're still subscribed, and dingle, dangle, and tingle all at the same time. Choose your weapon carefully, everybody. Just hit the close to
in the best possible way.
Yes, hit the close to bell so you get all the notifications about what we're doing next and when we're doing it, whether it's more extras like this or live streams on Type 40 Live, or it could be the Type 40 podcast itself too. So what I wanted to ask you about, well, actually, you sent this to me at around the same time that I noticed it, and I was just savoring every aspect of this. This is a piece of artwork by the fan artist Ant Lamb. Now, I don't mean any slight on this. Ant isn't just a Doctor Who fan. He is a professional artist, a digital and traditional artist of some note. Now, I saw this online. You sent it to me the same morning in a direct message. It's a collection of various Cybermen, isn't it, in a tunnel with lots of other elements in there. You sort of stare at it and you see a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And I thought, wow, what an amazing piece of artwork. But it's attached. And I wondered, why had he produced this? And you scroll down and you find out that it's the cover, isn't it, to a brand new collection that's coming out later this year. I think it's coming out in the autumn, sometime in September. This is from the pages of Doctor Who magazine, simply Cybermen, the ultimate comic strip collection. It's not really surprising, is it, Gary, in a comic strip legacy like Doctor Who's, which goes back, way before Marvel. It goes back to not that long after Doctor Who started. It stands to reason, doesn't it, that as well as the Doctors themselves, that the Doctor's biggest enemies, like the Daleks and the Cybermen, have had a storied history in comic book form too, haven't they?
Well, the Daleks, got their own. This is a decade before Genesis of the Daleks. The Daleks had a long run in TV Century 21 in the back page with gorgeous art, and it was like a sequential story. It ran for, I think, 104 weeks, 104 episodes, and it was a collection of stories which went from the earliest history of the Daleks all the way through to them discovering Earth, which was set up then Dalek Invasion of Earth. So written at the beginning by David Whitaker, story's first story editor. And so the Daleks have been, and then the Doctor himself with, I think, was it Bill Neville art, started in TV comic with Hartnell.
That's right.
And then went all the way, has continued all the way through in various places, whether it be Countdown or TV Action, TV comic, with a gorgeous, John Pertwee era, which almost looks like, it looked like paintings, in a magazine. Such beautiful art, until the day when, in '79, when Doctor Who Weekly started, and that became the home for Doctor Who comics.
Yeah, the weekly title ran for around a year, didn't it? It was a success, but not enough of a success to sustain a weekly title. It evolved into Doctor Who Monthly, which evolved into Doctor Who Magazine. And throughout that time, the comic strip has remained a mainstay, hasn't it? Up until a couple of years ago, they had a bit of a gap due to, I'm not quite sure why it was. I think they said they simply couldn't afford to run the comic strip. They had to sort of weigh things up, didn't they, for a while? But it is back now. It's back in the mix. And yet, I'm the same as you, Gary, quite frankly. Some of my favourite Doctor Who stories of all time have been in the pages of Doctor Who magazine. And some of them have involved those mainstays of the show. I mean, they didn't always use the TV companions or anything like that, did they? But the villains were sort of essential. Doctor Who comics have had some great monsters over the years. And I think the Cybermen, in many respects, have been served better in comic book form than they probably have on the television. And on this front cover to the new Cyberman book, so the ultimate comic strip collection that's out, this is utilising models owned by the digital artist Gav Rymel. So Antlam has produced this beautiful, striking, in fact, cover with these futuristic Cybermen in the dead centre, surrounded by a lot of other elements there, which immediately sets off a set of fireworks in the brain of a Doctor Who comic books fan, doesn't it? Because there's so many, I wouldn't say they're deep dives as such, but they're iconic images in their own right. The blurb from this says, this is from Panini, they say, humanoids who rejected the weakness of flesh and blood millennia ago, the Cybermen are deadly armoured warriors driven by cold logic. Across the stars, they have waged cyber war on 1,000 worlds, eager for more organic beings they can convert into obedient soldiers of the cyber empire. Inside this epic collection, you can discover all of the Doctor's incredible encounters with this unrelenting foe, taken from the pages of Doctor Who magazine. So it's a collection of heaven knows how many Cybermen stories from Doctor Who magazine, with a list of some of the industry's best creators. Never mind Doctor Who comics. You've got Alan Barnes and Andrew Cartmel in there, names we associate with Doctor Who. But there's also Steve Parkhouse, David Lloyd, Steve Dillon's there, Grant Morrison, John Ridgway, Adrian Salmon, fantastic artist, Scott Gray, Martin Garati, all these people who we've seen their names in Doctor Who magazine for decades, haven't we? So yeah, this is very exciting time for people who, if you weren't around when the weekly and the monthly were running and you never read these comic strips, now people can get all of them in this one volume. But this follows a set of Dalek releases, doesn't it, from last year, Gary? So these were
these are the two
volumes.
Yeah, these are the two Dalek. These are the two Dalek volumes. Although probably you can see them better on the picture Dan just had up, but still with these gorgeous covers, they really go all out just to make this as beautiful, as they can. And these two incorporated all of the Dalek stories. And I think, though, that from...
Show us the spines. See how thick they are, mate. Show us the spinage. Yeah. Whoa. See, I didn't buy these. They do look gorgeous. They look very shiny, Gary. Very shiny indeed.
Yes. Now, according to the page count, this Cybermen collection that we're talking about is only slightly less than these two combined.
That would make sense.
In terms of the page count, because these together total about 400 pages, and I think the upcoming Cybermen collection, I think they said was like 380. So you're getting basically, they're going all out on the Cybermen. They're not splitting it into two. They are it's like a cyber celebration, and they're putting all these stories in one volume, and there are some fantastic stories in this.
You've got it bang on. I mean, it's exactly 380 pages is what I've got here, and it's got the comic strips. I haven't got a number of strips in here, but I did notice that it's priced on Amazon at £28.75, which is roughly twice the price. So it'd be the equivalent price of those two volumes put together. So, but it's still in paperback though. Which, if it's that thick a volume, I'm wondering whether the spine will be tough enough to take all that extra page count.
You're right, because that actually would be, I have all the Panini collections here, and that actually would be among the biggest
because if it's perfect bound, and even with a spot varnish heavy card cover, I used to work in this field, so I know my stuff. It would have to be quite thick card as well.
Plus, isn't it, Dan, since, I mean, you have the professional background on this, if you, depending on how you bind it, you can't really open the pages too much flat, which means that some of the art that's near the, what do you call it?
In the margin, in the bleed.
In the inner margin, you know, might be you risk either splitting it or not being able to see all of the art when you open it.
Which would be a great shame. So, Gary, I didn't take a punt on the two Dalek volumes there, largely because I've got every single issue of Doctor Who magazine, and I thought, well, I've already got this material. But apparently they look beautiful. They were remastered, weren't they, from as much of the original art as they could get their hands on in those two. So
let me show you one of the things that I love most about the Panini volumes, and they didn't do this at the start. They started doing this more along when they started collecting the around the Sylvester McCoy era, when they started collecting that. They do a commentary section where it's basically like the comics book equivalent of a director's commentary. The writers and artists talk about their inspirations, how they did it. There might be a lot of
that looks like quite a lot of pages dedicated to it as well.
A lot of early art, and you get the history about where their inspirations came from and all of that. And even there is, sometimes you get, like here's one where you get the original.
I'm just sighing because now I've realized, Gary, I've got to buy these. I've
Let me find.
This is going to cost me another 60 quid.
Well, the one, where is the?
What's he looking for? What's he going to go up with next?
I'll show you. I'll wait till what I show you when we start talking about the McGann story, which has to do with the Cybermen that people may not recognize on that cover. I'll kind of hold off about what I was going to do, but it's really for that director's commentary, because yes, it may be double dipping, especially if you have all of these in some form or another. But I love getting the background and hearing from the writers about the histories of the stories I read. I love that. So that's,
and to be fair, if you've got 600 issues of Doctor Who magazine, the specials and things like that, if you've got a volume like this, maybe on the shelf, on an available bookcase where you can't have piles and piles of magazines, there's a lot to be said for the convenience of having it there. You can just take it out from the shelf and dive into your favorite story there. So do you know how many stories are in the Cybermen volume?
The only thing I've seen, and I saw one solicit for it, it said 20 plus stories.
Wow.
And I assume that means like even a multi-part one is considered one story. So not like 20 parts is 20 stories. So there's 20 stories, including a number, I think they're probably all multi-parts.
Well, there was 6 in each of the Dalek volumes, wasn't there? So I think we've got a pretty good deal going on here.
It's going to be a great collection.
So the commentaries are apparently done by Doctor Who comics historian Ian Scoonis, who, at least I think that's how you pronounce his name. And he didn't write a giant compendium on Doctor Who comics a few years ago, a couple of volumes of that. So really what this guy doesn't know isn't worth knowing.
He wrote, I have it, it's in the other room, but it's called, I think, the Doctor Who Comic Companion. And basically he covers everything from the very first Hartnell story, I think, up through until the very beginning of Doctor Who Weekly, because for years he's been working on or saying that he wants to do part 2, which is Doctor Who Weekly #1 forward. But this covers everything from like 1964 to 1979 in that volume that you're talking about.
Oh, I mean, before we go on too much more about the Cybermen, why on earth, now that we know, in fact, they've had the rights for 30 years, haven't they? Panini, Marvel UK. Why haven't they reprinted all of the Polar-style stuff from TV Comic Countdown to all of it in volumes like this? I would snap those up. Even though I've got every issue of Classic Comics, I bought that when it came out, like 92. But they only printed a certain number of those, didn't they? There was still lots of material they didn't print, and none of it was remastered.
No.
I would be all over any volume of those that they produce. And quite frankly, now I do feel a little silly for not buying the 2 Dalek ones. Now I've got FOMO, Gary. I've got FOMO.
They're still. I don't think they're sold out by any means. I think one came out last year, right?
I'm weeping for my wallet. It's going to take a big hit.
Can you imagine those countdown and TV action Pertwee stories in like gorgeous remastered? Well, I mean, that would look. That's like,
I know.
Gorgeous stuff.
We could do a whole show about all of those too. We probably will. If you'd like more comics talk here with us on Type 40 Extra, I don't think I have to twist Gary's arm too hard to get him to come back and to talk about any of that. So maybe we could sort that out. But yeah, when I saw this, Gary, I would imagine the same things struck you as had struck me. It was those elements that make you go, oh, I can't believe, look, it's him, it's them, it's that story, it's this, it's that. And most notably of all is the character of Croton, isn't he there? So he's on the left-hand side of this artwork. He's a fictional character created during Doctor Who magazine, or Doctor Who Weekly, as it was then. So this is a long-standing character that was star of a self-contained story initially. They used to do these as backup strips a lot, didn't they? Self-contained stories centered around Doctor Who monsters such as the Sontarans and the Daleks and that kind of thing. And Croton was the star of one of those called Throwback, The Soul of a Cyberman, wasn't he? Way back.
Yeah, for the first couple of years of the weekly and for maybe like the first year of the monthly, this was kind of like the Doctorless universe. It's like Doctor Who didn't feature. I mean, you have the 4th Doctor there basically kind of introducing, but it was basically about Daleks, Cybermen, or Sontarans, or Ice Warriors, or whatever, little vignettes, Autons, and the Doctor didn't feature, and it was basically in the universe, but not with the Doctor. And I'm sure a lot of the backup strips featuring Sontarans in various forms, whether Croton here, or others, I think all of them will be included in all the Cybermen ones will be included in this collection. But yeah, this was very popular. This must have struck readers because, Croton, who was the Cyberman with a soul, and of course what that would be like. And he featured in 2 of the multi-part backups and was so popular that he became a key to one of the long-running arcs in the McGann era. There you go.
Yeah. He's a very distinctive character, isn't he? And it's incredible that 2 decades later, practically, that the character was brought back and made a companion proper, as you say, to the 8th Doctor. And Izzy, that was then, wasn't it, during that particular run?
That is what I think I love most. Of the many things I love about the Doctor Who comic, this is the one thing I love most because it's all its own. Yeah, they break canon and all of that, but they really do try not to.
Well, you could say that the TV series breaks comics canon.
Breaks comics canon. But the thing about it is, it's an organic whole from the very first Tom Baker story until the final Peter Capaldi story. It's all organic to where some characters keep coming up over and over again, where one supporting character in the first Peter Davison serial is a key player in Peter Capaldi's last epic. It basically are these same supporting characters that if you followed the comics in some form or another from like 79 through now, it so rewards you because it's just the vastness of this comics universe just keeps growing and growing.
The collections sold very, very well, didn't they? They were put out over an extended period, all in chronological order there, as you say, going from right the way from those early weekly strips up to as present day as they could possibly get. So I suppose it stood to reason that they would look to new ways to exploit the old comic book material. And they started off with a collection of the old Dalek strips, didn't they, from TV Century 21.
They did.
And now it seems they're getting round to being ever more creative ways of getting more of these strips before more fans' eyes. Yeah, that's the one. That's gorgeous. I mean, I bought that even though I'd got the original collection from the mid-90s, the unremastered one, the floppy one.
Just gorgeous. I mean, if you're a fan of comic art, I mean, even Doctor Who, leave Doctor Who aside, just if you're a fan of comic art, this is...
You can't really get much better than that, can you? That's the way I look at it. I mean, looking at Croton here, what I like about him is that, well, in the comics there, he's got that very distinctive look, hasn't he? He's got big number 1 on his chest plate, so that's always survived, and that the black masked area that comes to a point where his nose would be there. These are all aspects of this particular character we never see anywhere else, and Ant has incorporated that into his artwork for this special, and he knocks it right back, so it's literally in that corner. So I suppose to the untrained eye, it just looks like another Cyberman. But Ant has been good enough to put up a lot of these concept artworks up on his Twitter profile at the moment. So if you go and follow Ant on Twitter, you can see gorgeous stuff like this, because it's a very, very distinctive character. And I practically yelped. My inner 6-year-old yelped when I saw that on the artwork for this brand new Ultimate Collection. Gary, were you the same? It's Croton. It's Croton.
No, it is. It's wonderful because, like I said, if you follow the comics for any length of time, and because the comics obviously aren't as widely known, for example, as the TV show, everybody, but so in a way, you still feel that even though, everybody has these graphic novels and has read the monthly magazine, you still feel kind of like these characters a little bit more special, because it's kind of like you may know about them, but not everybody does. So this is like your thing, if you kind of know what I mean. Do
you think it's because we may watch, for example, Doctor Who with friends or family, or we may watch it alone, obviously, but I think most people will watch them with friends or family. It's just one family member in the average family home. Whereas when it comes to comic strips, you read a comic strip alone, don't you? It's focused,
intimate in the sense that, I mean, all of you is trained on one thing. You decide where your eye goes and your eye rows, and
we decide the pace, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, it's all of it's a very personal experience. I mean, the sharing obviously comes later when you're talking about, reviewing what did you think, hey Dan, did you read the newest issue of Avengers or something like that? And then we talk about, wasn't that art great? Then it becomes shared, and then it becomes a shared passion. But initially, you're right, it's just very individual.
You're wearing a T-shirt with some striking comic book artwork that we discussed a few minutes ago.
Yes.
But there's one frame in particular that stayed with me, not just in my childhood, but into adulthood. And I was just thinking how great this would look on a T-shirt. And I would imagine you feel the same way. This was the final frame of the original Croton strip from way back then, wasn't it? Now, this stayed with me for years. I mean, obviously, I kept the original issues. I never threw out my Doctor Who weeklies. But this one image, it said so much. It was so tragic, wasn't it, this character?
That's the thing with a lot of the backup strips, is they were not happy, fun, on to the next adventure. A lot of these strips were very dark with very down endings, very not up by any means. But I mean, because this is not overloaded with word balloons where the artist just says, let the image speak for itself, and you can feel... It's very evocative. I mean, you feel there's loneliness, there's solitude, there's giving up, and it's just because
Gary, the main strip that got deep at point. I mean, it was very the main strip, the Dave Gibbons illustrated stuff, was very broad in scope, wasn't it? It was spectacular reading, but it was still very Doctor Who. It was still, even as dark as it could get sometimes, it was still very cozy and quite bouncy. It was still very positive and had the vibe of Doctor Who. Whereas these strips, they felt, and their protagonists, they wouldn't have been out of place in the average issue of 2000 AD.
Oh, not at all. I mean, it also gave you the feel kind of like a Twilight Zone with a twist ending, which kind of makes you go,
that's a better comparison. Yeah.
That's very, but no, I mean, the 2000 AD, absolutely. I mean, 2000 AD gets like really wild, but it wasn't like, I mean, there was all kinds of, anti-heroes and down endings and all of that. And this wasn't afraid to do that. I mean, you got to give credit to Des Skin, whose vision the weekly was that, he thought he gave kids enough credit for being able to handle different moods and different tones of story. They didn't all have to be the same kind of fun, oh, hey, it's a comic book thing. I mean, there's a lot of emotions that panels like this or stories like this kind of generate. And he knew, no, the kids can handle that. It's fine.
We could handle it. Looking again back to this cover, that's not the only thing that was in its gift. We've got just in from Croton there, we have this other Cyberman, which looks, at first glance, that just looks like any 1980s Cyberman, doesn't it? You can hear David Banks saying the word. Go on, you want to do it.
Excellent.
Do it again.
This is excellent news, Doctor.
Magic, Gary, absolute magic. You see what I mean? You can put the words in its mouth. But if you're a comics reader, then it's take a closer look there. I've got another closer look at this character. But this also is an echo from a very particular Doctor Who magazine comic strip, isn't it?
Oh, yes. This is from the wonderful Sixth Doctor comic, where the story itself didn't have a title. The 3 chapters, I think, were Genesis, Exodus, and Revelation. But this was very much, this was not an origins of the Dalek story, but the Doctor stumbles upon a planet where a scientist is forcibly converting some of the peasants into Cybermen. And that's this actually panel and this wonderful picture that I've not seen before you put it up of the, on the right. That is just, I could stare at that for a couple of hours. But the stories aren't afraid to go into what I still think is one of the best aspects of the Cybermen when they do it on the television, which is body horror, which is basically what, how the Cybermen really started before they became kind of like stompy robots in a lot of New Who. And the stories that deal with that in the comics, because the comics have no budget, which when it comes, they're not restrained by any budget whatsoever. So they can draw whatever weird, wild, wonderful, and warped things that the authors come up with. But yeah, this is a story which shows you really how horrific the sense of, violation and desecration and having your identity ripped from you and forced into this, that really is only the Peter Capaldi's finale kind of went near those themes in the same way.
Obviously, this was illustrated by John Ridgway, who's probably one of the most noted Doctor Who artists to this day, isn't he? Again, a great career before, during, and after his time working on Doctor Who magazine, an illustrator of great note, and there's a mass volume of his work. Still working on Doctor Who stuff as well for Cutaway Comics. But again, when I think back to the mid-80s and key imagery from that time, this is absolutely one of them. And as you say, all those titles to this story, all its component parts that all got so biblical, they sort of chime in, don't they, with that idea that there's something semi-religious about the Cybermen's devotion to their cause, to furthering their existence and growing the cyber race. There's something cult-like about it, something deeply, deeply unsettling that I don't think that they've managed to do this as well as they have done in comic book form on the TV show. As you say, they've kind of been a little bit reduced in New Who to being the stompy wompies, doing the things that you would expect monsters like this to do, to chase around after the Doctor and companions and cohorts slowly enough that they can get away from them. I love the Cybermen, but I'm aching to see something a little bit more literate done with them. And Big Finish have done great stuff with the Cybermen too, haven't they?
Oh, well, of course. Things like, Spare Parts, which is considered a classic, and some others. But, with the picture you just showed, I wanted to say a lot of times, and even in the classic series, that we see the finished version, the kind of clean, shiny, pristine, finished versions, whether it be in U2, in New Who, New Who, but it's that in-between part. It's then how did they go from being a human to being a Cyberman? It's that in-between part that's the horrific, like this, or like what happens to Lytton in Attack of the Cybermen. That sense of just having everything you are stripped from you in a very, you have the bloody lake here on the right, which is, it's horrific, but it's appropriate for what's happening. And this is the deeply disturbing, horrifying elements of this, aspect of the Cybermen process.
I hadn't thought of that. And you can see as well the line of other Cybermen disappearing off into the tunnel there. Yeah, it would have been, so this strip, I think, ran probably early to mid 1986. So it would have been after Attack of the Cybermen.
Yes, and it was collected. It was collected later in this issue of Classic Comics, where you can see the arm
of course,
there.
with Colin's artwork,
there.
Colin Howard, friend of the show, Colin Howard.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten about that. Beautiful job from Colin.
And the other thing that it does is, depending on what you think about colorization, it actually, colorizes the original black and white, depending on what you think about the color choice. But
some of the colorizations were better than others, weren't they? For me, these strips absolutely belong in black and white. I think that's how John Ridgway intended them to be. It's just fabulous, absolutely fabulous stuff. And I'm just thinking of the people out there who maybe haven't sampled any of these comic strips. Well, now they get the chance, don't they, with these new volumes? But again, looking back to this amazing cover artwork, the spotlight is given to Cybermen that people won't recognize from the television at all, will they? These were created, these were imagined straight for the comics, weren't they, as a version of the Cybermen that I suppose they were going for broke at this point. This would have been again 1998, 99, when there was no sign of the show coming back to television. And what I love about what Martin Garati did in the design of these Cybermen is that they just looked at it as if to say, look for a design of Cybermen that you couldn't possibly at that time have achieved on television.
No, if these Cybermen had been on television, obviously they would have to be CGI.
Completely CGI.
Look, there you go. This was actually, I have to correct you on the date there. This was, I think, 2004, 2005. This was actually Paul McGann's epic finale of his 9-year run in the comics as the Doctor. He was the Doctor in the comics from 1996 to 2005, and the way
it was called The Flood, wasn't it? I'm not getting my stories wrong, at least.
It was an eight-part.
I didn't think it was that late.
8-part story, and the thing about this is no spoilers, but you can just. I can't imagine anybody looking at the art you're showing now and just going, "Oh my gosh, that's fantastic." The great thing about these Cybermen is they wanted to give it a futuristic feel. So they had like light refraction shields so they could become invisible. Their fingertips had needles that could pop out that could do like a cyber conversion of people. They had these retrograv gliders that you see there, which I can only imagine what that would look like if this was done as like a full animation. What the Cybermen are doing in this, which I think is actually, if they would have done this on television, this would be, well, this is the best Cybermen plot ever. Basically, they want to use human emotion. They want to weaponize human emotions against humanity. So what they do is they figure a way to basically toggle human emotions like up to 12 and overwhelm everybody so that they'd be begging to be converted into Cybermen, and they'd be free of this flood, as the title goes, of emotion, which I actually think is a pretty darn clever idea of the Cybermen. And it's a great story. It was Paul McGann's finale, and because you knew he was coming to the end of his time in the comic as the Doctor, you never knew kind of how it was going to end or whatever. But this would be just beyond astonishing if they were to do it on the show.
Well, it's been, so I wouldn't have read this. I don't think I've ever reread this. So if you say it came out in 2004-ish, so this is 19 years ago, I could dig out my issues, but you're convincing me to invest in these brand new volumes that are coming from Panini for the convenience and to get to see them looking better than ever, really. And what I like about these as well is that by this point in Doctor Who magazine, they had gone full color on the comic strip.
Yes.
So these were never developed and imagined as black and white artwork. So when they were colorized, it looks like it's meant to be in color. In my view, this looks proper in color. I wouldn't have this any other way. Whereas the Ridgway stuff never looks right for me if it's not in black and white. Strange, isn't it?
No, I think Ridgway. I mean, the fineness of Ridgway, who is basically the Colin Baker artist, that only benefits from being able to just see that fine line. He was so fine in his art. This obviously does not need to be in black and white, but yeah, this is like a color epic. It's
closer to, it's somewhere between the kind of stuff that Dave Gibbons did. It's got the kind of movement and sense of scale that Gibbons had. But it also reminds me of the artist Phil Hester, who used to work on, if you remember the Green Arrow run with Kevin Smith writing called Quiver.
Oh, yes. Or when they resurrected Green Arrow.
Yeah. Yep. That's what Martin Garati's art has always reminded me of. He's very economical with his lines, but the stories are no less atmospheric for it all.
Yeah, Scott Gray, who was the writer for pretty much all, which was the second main writer for the Eighth Doctor era, and then you said Martin Garati. The great thing about the Eighth Doctor era is, for me, the comics was my Eighth Doctor era because I wasn't getting the books as rapidly as they were coming out, the BBC books, as rapidly as they were coming out in the UK. So for me, the comics, when I think of the Eighth Doctor era, I think of his comics run. That's the Eighth Doctor for me.
You know what? Yeah, I've always said that I felt that way about the Big Finish stuff, and I still do. But I suppose it was largely after the fact, because by the time he got into his swing on Big Finish, Russell T Davies was already kind of producing brand new TV Doctor Who. Whereas, we lived with Paul's Doctor through those strips from 96 onwards, not just in Doctor Who magazine, but in the Radio Times as well, in those wonderful Lee Sullivan half pages.
Yeah, the way that and which featured the Cybermen.
The Cybermen, yeah.
That means, what? I wonder. Do you think the rights are such that they could reprint those in this, or is that an entirely different rights issue for the Radio
I suspect. I don't know, because they were written by Gary Russell and illustrated by Lee Sullivan. Were they both guys very associated? Lee Sullivan's back on the magazine at the moment, isn't he? But I would say they were specifically commissioned by the Radio Times. Okay. So I can't see. Perhaps Panini could somehow get the rights, but I think we'd have to wait for some sort of official BBC collection, or maybe because they used to do the Radio Times. The Star Has Fallen on that once great magazine. But if you remember, up until a few years ago, they used to do some great bookazines. Some of them centered around Doctor Who. They should collect it. I would buy that. I know lots of people would probably buy a collection of those Eighth Doctor strips. They've been recently let in from the cold, I think, where more people are reading them and know about them and making podcasts about them. Aren't we, Kenny, if you're watching?
They're basically, the entire Paul McGann 9 years is collected in 4 volumes. And what made that era so special, just very quickly, is that the writers structured them like seasons, basically, to where each multi-part show kind of had what at times was a very subtle arc that was developing, which then would kind of blow up and be resolved in the big kind of much longer multi-part kind of season finale. And then there would start another cycle of individual kind of serials, which all lead up into this. Now, The Glorious Dead here, that resolving sequel of that kind of quote unquote season was 10 parts. Which means it took a full year for that story to play out in the comics. But that's the way, and that just, I love the McGann.
At the time, it's quite frustrating. At the time, it's quite frustrating, isn't it? Waiting nearly a year for. I say, Gary, at the time, it's quite frustrating waiting nearly a year for a storyline to play out. But when
that's what we're doing now with.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing now with the 14th, with the first 14th Doctor story. That's what's happening now. One quick thing about the Flood is that when it was collected here in the final volume, and I think they're probably going to include this in this new collection. So that's another reason to get this collection, is the kind of director's cut parts of it here. You know, it talks a lot about, you know, character, you know, early character sketches and earlier sketches of, you know, how the Cybermen were evolved. Yeah. But the thing that made this story special is originally Russell T. Davies had given the magazine permission to have the Flood end with him regenerating. And we would have actually seen the regeneration in the comic, but because of rights, because of that, you couldn't see the new Doctor until we saw him on television, and then it didn't work out. But look at this really quickly, Dan. So initially, this would have been the last panel of the Flood, where we see Destry there, his companion, and he's dressed in his 8th Doctor outfits, but then he regenerates into the 9th Doctor, and that's what could have been for the comics. But I think all of this history for the Flood story will probably be included in this new collection. Another reason to get it.
I hope so. And there'll be a wealth of other comic strip material as well by various different artists. I'm thinking of this one in particular by Mike how do you pronounce this? Mike McMahon, the Junkyard Demon story from the late Tom Baker era. It gets striking image again. It wouldn't look right. I know they have colorized this too, but in my view, this never looks any better than in black and white.
What did you think about this story? Did you like this story?
At the time when I was a kid, I hated it. I didn't get it. But now when I read it, obviously I got deeper into comics, appreciated comics that were slightly more left of field. Then I came around to it eventually. But at the time,
was the art too stylized for you?
Yeah, back when I was a kid, first reading this, I liked the Dave Gibbons stuff. I didn't like this. But now, I'm all over this. In fact, this is very similar to the kind of artwork that I do when I'm working sequentially. So, the way that they use a lot of negative space, the way that some of the artists do. I mean, Mike Mignola is very good at that as well, isn't he? The Hellboy.
And he did 2000 AD, right? This artist.
Maybe. Yes, of course he did. He worked on, was it the ABC Warriors?
Okay.
I think it could have been. Bit rusty on 2000 AD because I didn't buy very much of it.
But see, this is what the thing I love, because, I mean, and you put out, I mean, you said something very important. It's something you don't like when you're one age. You could come back to it later and appreciate, just all you were missing. But I think, to me, that's the fantastic thing. It just shows you that Doctor Who is able to encompass so many different interpretations, to an extent, I kind of keep the last. Let me put a limit on that. I would say to an extent. Let's keep that to the comics.
The retro docs, great disclaimer.
No, yes, absolutely. I mean, in the comics, there's so many different visual, interpretations of the character for the comics, and to me, it's just kind of like, well, it's not really my thing, but I can kind of see, but that's just that just shows you, how great Doctor Who is. It can do all of it. But that cover, man, I cannot get over this cover. This is an amazing
it's cover. Absolutely
and
beautiful.
Look at the one thing that's striking, that's different to any other Cyberman design at the right, is I love the triangular shape of the head. You have the face not only triangular, but you have the handles triangular as well. That's such a distinctive design.
Looking at it closely like this as well, Gary, is you see the sort of the diamond-like motif in the helmet as well. Reminds me a little bit of the Vision from the Marvel Comics.
Oh, yes, that's right.
The whole
thing.
That's
right.
And we've got a spacecraft whizzing around the bottom as well, which doesn't look unlike the Millennium Falcon. I can't quite remember which strip that was from. The little insectoid creatures that are running around here.
Double check, I think. Is that from the Sylvester McCoy story where they go up into space and they lift?
Yes.
I think it is. It's
Yes.
from this. It's from this story, which is also in the collections. Called it's the only Cyberman story they did for the Seventh Doctor, called The Good Soldier.
What a memory this man's got. I knew he'd be the right guy to bring on for this. Absolutely awesome. So this is out. When's it out?
When is it out?
Published the 1st of September 2023 from Panini. This is 380 pages of classic comics with those brand new commentaries by Doctor Who comics historian Ian Schooners. I think Gary should have probably chipped in on that, shouldn't he? It's currently priced at £28.75 over on Amazon, but you can get it directly from Panini as well. If you go over to Amazon, I think they're still showing the original artwork, which wasn't very inspiring. I've got to be honest. It was a placeholder artwork for this final sensational piece by Ant Lamb, and you can see it looks incredible there next to the others in this series. I wonder whether they're going to carry on with these, Gary. Which other characters they could concentrate on next?
Well,
because there's not been that many Master stories.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was just thinking about the Master. I don't know, because this is going to include those great Cybermen single-page stories that was very much in the style. Adrian Salmon in the style of the 60s TV 21. I don't know. I mean, obviously they're repurposing. These have all been available, I think, most of them in other collections, like by doctors. But I think this is kind of repurposing with new commentary and maybe remastered art. But I honestly, Dan, can't think of any monster they've done or like theme offhand that they'd have enough to do with. I mean, obviously they could do like a monsters one, like a catch-all.
That'd be good, yeah. Who knows what's next for these? But I don't want to get ahead of myself. This is something. I'll probably get this. I'm probably going to get them all. Now, I told myself I don't need to double dip or triple dip on these, but I think it could be essential. Let us know what you think of this. Drop us a comment in the comment section. Have you got the 2 Dalek volumes? Are you waiting bated breath for the Cybermen? Are the Cybermen more your jam? And should I get these whilst they're still in print?
I do want to show a couple things that maybe I'm glad we're kind of not getting. Which is some of the more questionable cyber stories from the 60s TV comic. Now, as much as there is to love, and I do love the comic, occasionally there were things like this, like a Cyberman story called Flower Power, where the Cybermen were defeated because they were allergic to spores from this flower. So the Doctor just had to shove a bouquet in this Cyberman's face in order to defeat him. I'm kind of glad we're not getting that story, again.
Anyone out there who thought that gold was lame, just think how bad it could have been. Just think how bad it could have been, everybody.
The other thing that we're not going to get, but I do want to show it because we're not going to get any Pertwee Cyberman stories. So to make up for that, I want to show a quick page from the monumentally glorious Warp fanzine. And could this be what we're missing of the Third Doctor and Joe and the Brigadier?
Fantastic. Yeah, I love that.
And they even got the Cybermen right, because that's an Invasion Cyberman, which would have been the last story before the Pertwee era. So they even got that right. It's like, I would love to see a whole story based around this image.
Who's the artist on that piece, Gary? Because I've always meant to find out.
I was looking for that, and I can't. They don't even have a reference.
I thought it was Christopher Jones at first, but apparently it isn't, because I've looked it up before.
And I was trying to find it myself. There's no tag like on the right hand side. The Third Doctor face is by whatever.
It'll be in there somewhere. It'll be in there somewhere.
Yeah, it'll be in here. But I just thought, well, we're talking about Cybermen. We're not going to get the Third Doctor in this collection, so there you go.
Yeah, can't have everything. But what we can have, by the sounds of it, is a couple of dozens worth, practically, of great Cyberman stories from Doctor Who comics past. If you're a fan of the old strips, let us know which your favourite was. Which can't you wait to see remastered in all its either black and white or colour glory? I'm not sure what they're doing as regards that. Let us know which your favourite Cyberman comic strip there is in the comments section. Right. What else? Yeah, let's do the plugs now. Type 40 Live on a break at the moment. But whilst we're on a break, you can catch up on the playlist. You can get every edition of our live stream magazine format Doctor Who show there. Every episode, not just of Series 6 from this year, but all the preceding ones as well, including our Doctor Who Annual for 2023 and that 100th edition of the show from about 6 weeks or so ago now. So we had a blast on that. And obviously Type 40 Live will return. There's the Type 40 podcast too. That's up here. That's up here on the Type 40 channel in video form, but obviously the podcast is out there on the podcatcher of your choice. Get it in your ears on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Amazon Music, all those places too. Go and hit us up and give us a good review, a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, please, if you could. That one, no Cybermen this time. That's our review of Death to the Daleks. Myself, Simon Horton, and Stephen Noonan, talking in great depth about Death to the Daleks.
That was a fantastic episode.
Oh, thank you, mate.
I mean, I'm talking about Death to the Daleks, Dan. Yours, not so much. No, kidding, everybody. No, a wonderful, Stephen Noonan, as big a fan as you, Simon, and all of us listening, and the interchange, the interplay with all of you just is a great episode.
Yeah, he's a great sport, Stephen, a fountain of knowledge, and very much one of us with all this stuff. This makes for a great listen, even if I say so myself. And you can get our love letter to the Third Doctor there, as well as this deep dive review on the 1973, was it? The 73, 74 classic? Death to the Daleks. 74, wasn't it? God, I spent 2 hours talking about it.
Very early.
Yeah, just gloss over it, Dan. They won't notice. People out there who know every single date will be, what's he talking about? What kind of Doctor Who fan is he?
If you know the production code to Death of the Daleks, throw it in the chat.
This is Doctor Who's 60th anniversary year, everybody. You'd never know it from the way that the BBC behave, but we will get something eventually. Hopefully, thank heaven for the very few remaining great licensees like Panini are putting out quality items like this Ultimate Cyberman comic strip collection there. That's available from September. Again, get on that. The links will be in the description to the video, and you can go over there, and I think you can probably pre-order it and get it in your life sooner rather than later. Let us know what you think of it all through our social media. Of course, you can reach out to us on Instagram and Twitter at Type 40 Doctor Who, or by all means, steam over to the Type 40 Facebook group. That's where you'll find regenerations worth upon regenerations worth of Doctor Who fans. No showrunners yet, although you never know. No showrunners, but there's lots of fans there. We might get a conversation started about Doctor Who comic strips, which is their favourite Cyberman strip, Dalek strip, or just favourite strip generally. I think that'd be quite a good laugh. That'd be pretty good, wouldn't it, Gary? Where can people get in touch with you on social media? I forget which ones you do. You cherry pick, don't you? You're very hard to reach.
I don't tweet, or actually, it's not Twitter anymore. It's just called X. So I don't know what the actual, do we call like Xers or whatever? What do you call people on Twitter? Don't get X. I'm not on Twitter. I'm on Facebook under either RetroDoc or Gary Akers, Akers. I'm always in the chats for the Spacebook, and like Dan was saying, whether I think a great way to spend the hiatus until Dan and crew come back is either I would start with the most recent Type 40 and work your way back to 1, or start on the first one and work your way up. Watch them all. That'll keep you good and filled up until everybody returns.
I'll be sick of the sound of all our voices by the time we come back. Gary, I hope we can tempt you back onto Type 40 Extra and onto the Type 40 Live as well at some point in the near future.
Absolutely. Spacebook is the best channel going. I mean, if you're frustrated, seriously, if you're frustrated with how much is or isn't being done by the BBC, or even your question, what's being done, honestly, the Spacebook, if you want to just kind of celebrate everything about about the show, about being a fan, be part of a great community. This has been the great way to celebrate the 60th anniversary all year. Is right here with the Space Book.
How much did we say? A tenner? Was it a tenner?
We'll have your people contact mine.
Yes, so thanks for that, Gary. I know he's coming back. We've already talked about the next conversation that we're going to have, but just for your purposes, yeah, that's it for this one. The Ultimate Cyberman comic strip collection, that's out in September there from Panini. Yeah, let us know what you think when you get hold of it. That's it for this one, though. We always have the time if you have the space here at Type 40 Extra. Take care. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.